President Donald Trump attends a summit for NATO, an organization he once called obsolete, in Brussels, a city he previously called a hellhole. Can he and NATO's European members agree on who their real enemies are? And on International Missing Children's Day, we learn what can be done to both find and prevent losing children. Welcome to The Point, live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. The latest stop of what US President Donald Trump calls his big foreign trip is Brussels, the political heart of Europe, and the city he once called a hellhole due to issues related to Muslim immigrants. Analysts say anxiety was high and expectations low. President Trump may share first name with top EU leader Donald Tusk, but do not share opinions on key issues like climate change, Russia and trade. And after Trump urged NATO to play a bigger role in anti-terrorism, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg just announced the alliance will join the international coalition fighting the Islamic State. Did Trump's tough talk work to his advantage? After Trump called NATO obsolete in March and then not obsolete in April, officials crave for Trump to voice his strong commitment to NATO. Did that happen? Or if so, what would it mean? Join me today in Washington, D.C. is Michael E. O'Hanlon, Senior Research Fellow from Brookings Institution, and in London, Julia Himmerich, Research Fellow at the London-based think tank European Leadership Network. First, this is what NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said before the summit.
At the same time, we will agree to establish a new terrorism intelligence cell here at NATO headquarters, improving how we share intelligence, including on foreign fighters. And we will decide to appoint a coordinator to oversee NATO's efforts in the fight against terrorism. The other major topic we will discuss is fairer burden sharing.
Well, welcome to both of you on the show. First of all, Ms. Himmerich, now media reports suggest that NATO did a number of adjustments for Trump, for instance, keeping leaders' comments short, making topics more interesting and keeping Russia off their official meeting agenda. How have NATO officials been feeling about accommodating Trump this time?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Well, it's difficult to predict or to interpret how they're feeling, but it's basically been a meeting, not a summit, that has been surrounded by a lot of anxiety from all in Brussels and also from European capitals. So I think what we're hoping to see from this meeting today is a bit more of a clear idea of where Trump stands on NATO and on the alliance, and for the NATO officials that means that they hope that the steps that they have taken to accommodate his positions really will lead to a clearer commitment to the alliance and to a clearer understanding of where we stand at the moment on the transatlantic relationship and where NATO can go in the next few years.
Mr. O'Hanlon, now traditionally the first meeting between US President and NATO leaders is a get-to-know-each-other meeting. How is Trump's debut different from his predecessors already?
Well, of course, as Julia said, there's been an effort to make this a little less official, or at least a little less lengthy in some of the conversations and presentations. But most of all, it's because Donald Trump, of course, is a maverick and populist politician of a type we really haven't had in the United States in my adult lifetime, in decades at least. And therefore, all the questions that he's raised about how he will govern, especially in regards to NATO and Russia, have caused a great deal of anxiety, as Julia correctly mentioned. I agree with her. I think that actually things, however, are a little calmer now than they might have been 2 or 3 months ago. After all, President Trump has chosen people like Jim Mattis and H.R. McMaster to lead his national security team. They've said some fairly strongly reassuring things about NATO. And of course, Trump has also now been a little more critical of Russia and Putin. There doesn't seem the same danger that there was 6 to 12 months ago that he might wind up just creating this little informal alliance of strongmen because he had a certain predilection for Vladimir Putin. There seems to be a little bit more reasoning going into how U.S. policy towards Russia is developed. And I think there's also a reaffirmation of sanctions against Russia over Ukraine and a reaffirmation of the European Reassurance Initiative or Operation Atlantic Resolve, the effort by NATO to strengthen its deterrent in the eastern NATO member states. So I'm a little calmer and a little more reassured than I would have been a few months ago, but I agree with Julia, it's still a very important meeting.
Now, Trump will unveil a section of the World Trade Center officially named the 9/11 and Article 5 Memorial, signifying the only time in its history that NATO invoked the Mutual Defense Clause and helped fight al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Ms. Hemmerich, where does Trump stand on Article 5? Has he articulated on this issue yet?
Well, that is obviously a very important question for a lot of European NATO members. As we know, he has actually put that into question, that kind of solidarity that actually is the fundament of the NATO alliance. So it will be interesting to see whether this was just an off-the-cuff remark or if this is actually something that he is willing to question again. I do assume that there are high expectations that there will be some kind of commitment to Article 5 at this meeting, and that Trump will make a statement in that regard. It's definitely something that would be very welcome from European NATO allies. It is, to that extent, I think it is really important. It's not on the agenda, obviously, but it's something that is on everybody's mind, and it will be yeah, an important thing to watch.
And also good for optics as well. Mr. O'Hanlon, now this memorial hopes to remind Trump NATO is valuable even when there are disagreements. Right now, what is the biggest disagreement between the United States and NATO?
Well, the biggest disagreement is probably about burden sharing, which is sort of the flip side of Article 5. For those of your viewers who don't remember Article 5, they may want to Google it or read it with care because it actually is not quite as categorical as some people seem to think. What it says, it's essentially the mutual defense pact or pledge that says an attack on one is an attack on all, and if there's an attack on any NATO member, then others will consider all means within their power in response. It does not automatically require any particular type of military response. And of course, most NATO allies are not very capable of making a major military response, even if their rhetorical commitment to Article 5 is unambiguous. So in a way, Donald Trump is saying, maybe I'll maintain a little bit of ambiguity in my rhetoric, because it turns out that my country is really the military backbone of this alliance, not just because it's the biggest, but because we're one of the only NATO allies that's reaching or exceeding our 2% pledge, that 2% of gross domestic product would be spent on our armed forces. And so, you know, I don't see Trump as the only villain here, so to speak. I really think he has a point that European countries that expect America to be the backstopper of alliance security actually, in some cases, need to do a lot more. And I look around at countries like Germany, which is spending about 1.2% of its GDP on its military. This is an unacceptably low level. And some of what Trump's saying has merit. In fact, other Americans over the years have tried to say similar things, but been more polite and diplomatic about it, not allowed any doubt about Article 5 to creep in. And they've been unsuccessful. So I think Trump is simply upping the ante a little. I would prefer that he not leave any doubt about Article 5 because I'm nervous about how Russia could interpret that. But I sort of see what he's trying to do, and it's not without some basis in reality and in fact.
Another very important subject that's being discussed this time is anti-terrorism. Now, while Trump has been calling for a bigger NATO role in anti-terrorism, and NATO is enhancing its presence on their eastern flank with battle groups in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. So, Julia, why do the United States and EU nations disagree so much on whether Russia is a threat to Europe? Or are they still disagreeing?
Sorry, could you just repeat that question?
Yeah, so as I'm saying, you know, Trump has been asking NATO to put more emphasis in fighting terrorism, whereas NATO is seeing Russia more of a threat, as we have seen NATO stepping up its presence in the eastern flank. Why do the US and the EU or NATO countries disagree so much on the issue of Russia, and whether do you think that that is still a very big disagreement at this moment?
Well, we see that Russia isn't on the agenda, as you said earlier, and we don't actually know what the US policy is on Russia at the moment. We're still waiting to really get a clear idea of that, and that also includes what that could mean potentially for the NATO approach towards Russia. So last year, allies agreed on keeping up a dialogue and a deterrence approach when it comes to Russia, and that has obviously been embraced by the United States as well. They've also deployed troops to Poland, for example. So it's clearly something that if you look at what NATO is doing, that the United States is participating and not in any way undermining those efforts. But we don't really know what is happening behind closed doors, what the longer term strategy is of Trump when it comes to Russia. And clearly putting a focus on anti-terrorism and asking NATO to join that coalition is possibly one approach of Trump to basically change the focus of NATO and of the alliance overall, which obviously hasn't really been welcomed by a lot of NATO allies in Europe. Even in Europe, countries are divided on what is the best approach when it comes to Russia. We've seen the European Union has been able to uphold its sanctions, and it's been an agreement on that, but that hasn't been very easy. There has been a lot of opposition towards that from different political factions in Europe. And we've seen the British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, who's tried to increase those sanctions, but that wasn't possible. So even in Europe, I wouldn't say that we're necessarily everyone's on the same page when it comes to Russia.
Thank you very much. We have to leave it there. That was Michael E. O'Hanlon, Senior Research Fellow from Brookings Institution, and Julia Himmerich, Research Fellow at the London-based think tank European Leadership Network. And here is my very first point. This is the first face-to-face encounter between NATO leaders and the new US president. Although it's not yet known whether Trump will give NATO the kind of commitment they want from him, Trump has already secured NATO's pledge to join the US-led coalition against the Islamic State. However, some analysts are saying the more IS is squeezed on the conventional battlefield in Syria and Iraq, the more likely it will resort to lone wolf-style terrorist attacks in Europe. What will be the impact of NATO's decision to join the US-led coalition still remains to be seen. Thursday is designated as International Missing Children's Day. Now, missing children has always been an emotive issue in the world. The FBI reports that over 1,000 children go missing every day in the United States. An NGO called Missing Children Europe say a child is reported missing every 2 minutes in the European Union. Australian Federal Police report that 2 young people under the age of 18 are reported missing every hour in Australia. What about China? What are the reasons behind this problem, and what can be done to prevent children from going missing? I'm joined in Nanjing by Ms. Tong Xiaojun, Director of the Research Institute of Children and Adolescents at the China Youth University of Political Science. Ms. Tong, thank you very much for joining us. Could you first of all specify what missing means here? What are the different scenarios of children going missing?
You know what? We do not have a very universal definition about missing children, but usually missing children refers to children who left home, who leave home, or without or not under the care of their guardians, usually parents, long enough that we can reasonably suppose that children are at risk. Usually means their life is in danger or something bad happened to them.
And the age group, do
So
we have a definition of
usually
the age limit of 14, 18? Do we know? Do we have a definition?
When we say children, usually means children are under the age of 18, but missing children usually refers to low age of children. I mean low age between 0 to 17.
I see. Now, a China national radio report in 2013 said the number of missing children in China was nearly 200,000 every year. And the rate of missing children who were found was just about 0.1%. Now, this caused controversy because the Chinese public security authorities disputed these numbers. Do we have such statistics now about exactly the scale of the problem in China?
I mean, the controversial, I think, is reasonable because they use different kinds of standards to calculate the cases. Like the civil society, usually they calculate every report of missing children. But then for the public security, they usually calculate the case that they admit according to their standards. So that's the controversial results from. So usually the civil society, to them, the number is larger than the number of the public security bureau or ministry.
I see. Do we have any updated numbers from 2013 up to now?
No, I don't think so, because we do not have a very strict or very functional system of the statistics of the missing children. So if there is, then the public security, the number issued by them is the official one and is the newest one.
I see. What are the challenges of finding missing children in China in your eyes?
In China, finding missing children, I think usually the challenges are the same as the challenges in other countries or in other regions. Then, for example, the time for the parents or for the guardians to report the case is one of the factors for the police or for other people to help to find the children. And also in China or in other countries, it's the same. The regional, how to say that, the unbalanced development of different areas, like urban areas and rural areas. If the children are missing in rural areas, I think that the challenge would be bigger than the challenges in urban areas. So this unbalanced development of region is another challenge for people to find missing children.
Sure. Finally, now last week the Ministry of Public Security of China launched an upgraded version of the online missing children information distribution platform known as Reunion. Since the platform was launched last year, it has helped find over 96% of reported missing children. What do you think of the platform and the role of new technologies in finding missing children?
I think the platform is very good because that provides a place for everybody to look for the information, and also the information is issued by the official organizations. So the information is very serious, and also usually it's processed very effectively. So if people to look for information on that platform, the information is very, how to say, recent and new, or is real information. Because without that platform before, the information about missing children are passed on by people themselves, from mouth to mouth. So very often when someone look at the information or get the information actually has already passed on for 1 month or even longer. So the information sometimes is already outdated.
Yeah.
So this platform actually helps to provide a very good and real and recent information.
Thank you very much.
And also technology is very good too, because yes.
Yeah, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Ms. Tong Xiaojing, Director of the Research Institute of Children and Adolescents at the China Youth University of Political Studies. And I'm now joined by Ms. Wang Le, Deputy Director of Save the Children China, and Monica Cui, Executive Director of Safe Kids China, the first and only international non-profit organization dedicated to preventing unintentional childhood injury. Welcome to the show, ladies. Now, Monica Cui, first of all, why are there so many missing children every year and everywhere?
I think there are several reasons that so many children were missing and around the world, also in China. And the first of all, I think people all think that is that people doing some of the commit a crime for some money or for get some children that they can raise by themselves. I think this is like social level issues. And the second issues, I think that we should all admit that children, they are all curious, and they are natural with their natural growings. They're curious to finding anywhere the new. So while they were in the public area, that lead them to go around anywhere that if the parents is not well supervised. So that leads to the most important part is that the lack of the supervision of the parents that make a lot of this is also one of the issues that make the child missing, and the lack of the supervisions. There are also, I think this is also the issues that China that we're facing. It's not only the urban challenges when we were in a big public area, and also we were facing while in the rural areas, and especially when the young parents will come out to the urban cities for the work, they left the young children at home, so the children were not well supervised and by their grandma and grandparents, or even not well supervised. So I think these are the some of the major issues.
So
that
basically,
we are facing.
the missing children problem is a side effect, or is one of the side effects of China's economic development and the economic migration that have been taking place in China. Now, given these cases, how shall we better prevent and protect missing children? How should the parents be educated?
I think the parents should be well educated, and because now I don't think that the parents, while they were being parents, and they will not get the first how to well supervise their children. Although from the beginning they think that they can raise the child well, but for the supervision there also need some of the knowledges, and also need some of the skills for them, and their responsibility also. This is the first that they should think of it, but something that they need to know how to supervise, and how to they can help children not be abducted by the people. So, for example, when I look at the curriculum, that the education material for children, and all the words about the strangers, that the parent may educate the child to say, okay, you do not meet the strangers, and if the strangers talking with you, you do not talk with. But actually, some of the data. Some of the data showed us a lot of children were abducted by the family-related people. So that is what we have to face, that we have to understand, and the children should be well educated in this part too.
Yeah, Ms. Wang, now, just now we were talking about children missing, including runaways and abduction. What are the cases that Save the Children have been dealing with, and what have you observed as to the scale of this problem and the measures that are in place to fight it?
So Save the Children have been working on the area of missing children, child protection, more specifically also in anti-trafficking work for many years. Yes, as you just mentioned before, especially like in China, huge migration as well, what phenomenal, which children are voluntarily or being force moved with their parents. So with this movement actually created extra challenges and risk for children. In recent years, we've been also looking at a more systematic way on how actually the community, family, as well as policymaker countries can create a systematic system, be able to get children to be properly supported and protected while they are on the move.
Now, I know your organization has been working on the cross-border anti-trafficking projects for a long time. What is it mainly for? What's the biggest challenge there?
Since 2004, Save the Children been working on a Sub-Mekong region river anti-trafficking project, which right away from prevention to try to rescue, to provide child-friendly, child-sensitive services for traffic victims during detention, as well as follow-up support, help trafficking victims be able to rebuild and reconstruct their life after they've been rescued, and as well to reintegrate to the community life. In challenge-wise, I think, over the years we've been seeing quite positive progress, I think, from the national government in terms of issue 2 rounds of national plan of against anti-trafficking to women and children, as well as its big emphasis in terms of pushing cracking down of criminals. But there's still, in terms of how we can have a systematic way to prevent, to equip children and families with skills and knowledge to reduce the vulnerability from the beginning. As well, I think, in a way, more important to be able to have a comprehensive national protection system to dealing with any of those cases. Either
Thank you very much. We have to leave it there.
Without appropriate care.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wang Le, Deputy Director of Save the Children China, and Monica Cui, Executive Director of Save Kids China. And here is my last point. The only time I have almost experienced the agony of a parent of a missing child was when my daughter, my baby daughter, was carried away briefly by a stranger in a shopping mall for just a couple of minutes. We found her quickly from the arms of a woman who said she wanted to show my daughter to some friends because she was so cute. For that few minutes, the world already started to crumble, and I will never forget that feeling. As we mark the International Day of Missing Children, I asked the question what an individual can do to help. One small thing might be to care. Whether or not you are a parent who's watching, if you see a child who appears out of place, pause for a moment, look again and ask a question that might make a world of a difference to that child and to the parents anxiously awaiting his or her return. And that's all for this edition of The Point. As always, follow me on Twitter or visit our Facebook page using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN Live to watch our show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching.